If this were a garden, it would be a strange one. And tranquility can conceal surprises. Waiheke Island within Auckland's Hauraki Gulf is a rugged spot. It's the site of numerous Maori pās and featured in the infamous Musket Wars. And in a sheltered corner lies hidden Connells Bay. Bought by the Connells of Irish stock in 1803, it became a hub of sorts for the eastern edge of the island. Once home to generations of hardy farmers, kauri loggers and traders, the land has not lost its sense of drama, but has gained a curious new narrative that its forebears could not have foreseen. It has now become the home to a pair of unlikely art radicals, John and Joe Gow.
We bought the property in 1993 and basically bought it because we were looking for a project. We were passionate about planting native trees, New Zealand natives.
We just wanted something near the sea that had good anchorage, and we thought about a few acres. But this sort of grew. We bought this totally on passion.
John and Joe cannot be described as ordinary New Zealanders merely inquisitive about the arts. In the 1980s, John was destined to provide the financial backing to an unknown composer by the name of Andrew Lloyd Webber.
TVNZ did a documentary of the making of the financing of Cats in 1983, and it was a bit of, because we had provided all the finance for it, $3 million, which then was a substantial sum of money. It still is a very substantial sum of money today. And they interviewed Lloyd Webber, and they said, what do you think about the fact that all the money came from New Zealand? And he said, did it?
As Lloyd Webber's unsung heroes, the Gows gained a freedom with which to make bold new choices, and they plotted a return to New Zealand.
We came here to plant trees, basically. Our previous property, we had revegetated that with natives. And as we planted, we started to create rooms. And that's when we decided, well, let's put something in the rooms. And that's when we began to buy sculptures from galleries around New Zealand and put them into the rooms. And after that, we learned about the process of commissioning.
We probably wouldn't have bought a property like this, so isolated. Our plan was a sculpture park. It grew.
And so a mild art collection soon became a polite obsession.
We certainly didn't have a clear picture. It grew. In fact, it started to grow without us even thinking.
We bought one or two pieces from a previous property we had, but there was, it's hard to define the period or the time, but it evolved. It's a journey. And there became a time when we realised that, yeah, we can actually do something quite special and significant here.
Connells Bay is a 25-hectare site bounded by gullies and steep folds. The reclothing of the land with native trees and wildlife was essential to the vision of transformation. The Gows' journey as commissioners has taken them to a little-known conceptual artist whom they have given a large, ambitious opportunity. David McCracken is creating a massive new work to be ready in time for the new summer season.
He said to me, we would like a proposal of work, and they were quite specific. They wanted a work in Corten steel.
We watched his career develop as he entered sculpture on the Gulf events, and that's when we felt confident that we wanted to commission him.
When you start discussing bringing excavators onto someone's exquisite sculpture park with their manicured, lovely paddocks that they've gone to so much trouble to make nice. You suddenly start feeling the fear. But I felt that it was important to make the work, what it is. And I might be right.
McCracken's work will be the 28th sculpture for the park. But the Gau's path as commissioners began with another sculptor.
They asked me what would I like to carve, because they had so many logs, that they chopped down. And I said I would like to carve a canoe as a marking point in the property, because that's similar to how, in ceremonial days at most Polynesian islands, when the High Chief passed away, they usually take his either sailing canoe or his fishing canoe or whatever canoe, and he instead of lying it down next to his house, they stand it up next to the grave.
His canoe complete, Fatu noticed the split remains of a macrocapa, once struck by lightning.
And he just really turned around to John and said, look, I could carve that. And that's how it grew from that. And the finish of that work made us really realise the significance of that work for him in his career.
We didn't set up with a business plan it's not a business in one sense. It's it is just a gallery without walls. It's about bringing sculpture and art together in a natural environment.
At Connells Bay, the land bristles with inventive concepts and odd notions of beauty. From the outset, the Gaus understood the need to hand over trust to their artists, to offer a broad canvas for ideas to flourish.
We enjoy the process of the commissions, commissioning these site-specific or site-relevant works. We enjoy the process as much as we do enjoy the end work itself.
We did a walk around, and I took some time to think about which sites appealed to me, and this was the one. At that point, all the planting was planned or very small. So John and Joe would sort of wave their arms around and say, we're sort of working on this windows idea, so you'll come through and there'll be a sort of a window or a room.
It's fair to say we both took a risk. Catherine took a risk and we took a risk because
true.
There was a large sum of money back then, and we didn't know whether she was going to be able to deliver it on time, and we were encouraging her to increase her budget so that she was not at risk. We didn't want her to come back halfway through and say, well, I've run out of money.
I'd been to Mexico and was really, I'd been drawing a lot of steps and thinking about steps and ascension. So those were the things that were sort of milling around as I looked at the site. When I initially proposed the work, there was a bit of an adjustment for John and Joe while they worked out that once this work was here, it was so built into the land that it would always be here, and it wasn't something that if they chose to move that they could move with them, or they couldn't shift it to another site. It was permanent.
Completed, the work is deeply embedded into the land. But other commissions of the Gaus make no attempt to appease their surroundings.
The first request was to do a suspended work between these two hills. And I do a recce trip, which is great. You come up here and stay for a couple of days and walk around, and at that stage I try to keep things pretty contained. I don't talk too much about what I'm thinking, but they could tell that I wasn't that keen on the idea of doing a suspended piece. I find if you say, I'm going to do a stack of houses and they're red and white and they're made out of steel, people imagine it in their mind. And then you show it to them and they say, I didn't think it would be like that, I thought it would be like this.
As with all outdoor sculpture, Dawson's steel monolith needs to be regularly maintained. Caretaker's assistant Luke has the job today, but even John Gow has climbed it.
I heard he got stuck inside it at one stage, and I can remember there's a sort of a path that you have to know it. It's like a puzzle. You can climb through this or around this, and I haven't climbed it since I installed it, so and I'm not quite sure if I want to at the moment.
Connells Bay is in constant regeneration. The replanting has taken no fewer than 20,000 native plants over a period of 15 years. The endeavour is covered by teams of contractors, and John hired caretaker Noel to manage the restoration of leaf and glade.
Well, I didn't really know what he was on about at that stage because I've never been into sculpture. I'm an ex-truck driver, and it was quite exciting to see his foreplan, more or less.
But just when everything in the garden was starting to flourish, out of the blue, disaster struck.
Noel, our lovely caretaker, rang us at 6 o'clock in the morning and he said, I think you better come down here. There's been a slip.
I woke up at 2 o'clock one morning and had a look out after a big rain, and it was a beautiful night. The moon was up and I could see this gash in the hill. And I said to my wife, the whole hill's gone. When I came down in the morning, it had.
And we shot down as quickly as we could, and 2,000 cubic metres of molten mud had just oozed out of the hillside, completely blocked the road. That caused us to drain that hillside, retain it and plant it. And subsequently Chris Booth came along, and Chris is a very spiritual person, and he said, I'd like to make a work that celebrates the healing of the land. And hence he called his work Slip.
I wanted this sculpture to combine both the celebration of the beauty of a slip, even though we know how destructive it can be for human endeavours, but of course destructive for nature all the way through. We made like what I refer to an earth blanket sculpture in the form of these slips, using that wonderful sort of a delta-shaped form, 5 of them, some of them intermarrying with each other, and then they're held up by these long stainless steel cables anchored to these rocks that are stuck into the ground like something like the moai of Easter Island. And then we individually selected the stones to fill all the cells. It was a big job. People won't know that when they look at it.
We quite enjoy the process. We enjoy the mix of artists who we can get to the property. Some of them are very senior artists and some of them are very less experienced. But when they're starting to produce works that we respect and can see that there's real talent in them, we're very keen then to go and commission them. And wherever possible, we will try to get them to do their best or their biggest.
All hopes are still pinned on David McCracken to materialise a work for permanent installation. But the task of conceiving new ideas is a risky proposition.
There was a a sort of large monolithic object at first with a hole in it, and then a big stack of plates. Some of the ideas I just had logistical difficulty with. But I did come up with, I think, 3 proposals, or maybe even 4.
He started off saying he'll do A. He went through B, C, D, E, F, and all the time we were getting more and more uncomfortable because we just weren't quite relating to what he was going, and would he be able to deliver. And
I would get them down here and they would look at them and eventually say yes, and then I'd ring them up and say, I've changed my mind and I really want to do this now, and what do you think of this? And they would come down again and look at it, and eventually they'd say yes, and then I'd ring them up again and say I've changed my mind again. I started thinking about the idea of the accident, any accident, but a genuine accident as being the only perfect thing that I could think as an event, a perfect event. An accident was a perfect event. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I could make that into an artwork. And I realised that, you can't illustrate or portray an accident, because then it's no longer an accident. So I portrayed the poem.
well, the title of the work is The Best Laid Plans Go West, and as Dave, I think, has said, the whole project went west. But it did come right back, and he came back with a variation of what he set out to do, and the variation is much better than what he wanted to do when he first presented it.
McCracken's sculptural poem, Best Laid Plans Go West, will open the summer season. That is, if he's completed and installed it in time. The Gows are planning their summer season. The park will reopen to the public with guest houses ready. And each year, a call is put out to fill a bold, temporary commission. Last year's winner was Britt Bunkley.
When I won the commission, I felt great, of course, and I also was a bit shocked because it was different than anything I've done before. I never used gnomes before. Gnomes were... It was just a fluke. I mean, gnomes were something that just popped into my head when I was working on that project with students. I just went to the local store. I went to a local store and bought $6,000 worth of gnomes, and they looked at me like I was buying a fountain pen or something, or, you know, a garden ornament, you know, nothing unusual. They just said, sure, fine. So I decided to build a cube of these using 1,500 gnomes in a way to identify with the what I saw as primitive accumulation happening in China in recent years. Well, I think the contrast between the industrialized mechanical look and the beautiful natural or manicured natural park creates a maybe not a tension, but it creates an interesting look.
At the end of its life at the park, each temporary sculpture is removed, some more dramatically than others.
I didn't like the idea of smashing up something so deliberately and belligerently, no. But at the end of the day it happened, and there will be a burial of some of his work.
Jeff Thompson is this year's winner of the temporary commission. Jeff is already well known for his work with corrugated metals, and his cows were some of the earliest residents at Connells Bay. The new temporary work is inspired by the texture and form of a haystack.
I went out and bought about 30 bales of hay, 40 bales of hay, rolls of different size meshes of wire netting, and what I'm doing is cutting the wire netting and we're making it into sort of baskets, 2 layers, shove the hay in between, and then what I do is I run it through or press it into different machinery that I have here, a 20-ton press where I've made different mould shapes. I think I think it's got a solidness to it, which is quite nice, just because of the use of light and shadow on the surfaces, playing on the surfaces. But I think, though, it'll become like it's a part of an experience. People like Van Gogh did a whole series of paintings of haystacks. There's a German artist, Ansel Kiefer, who actually used straw and hay and mixed it with his paint and tar in his painting. So there is a strong tradition of actually artists working with this material.
Along with established artists like Thompson, the annual temporary commissions are an opportunity to engage emerging new talent.
They'd talked about how the farm used to be here and how they'd stripped all of the farm paraphernalia and put in trees, and I thought it was quite funny how the fences had turned into trees effectively, so that kind of got the idea going. I didn't really know what we were trying to achieve apart from a tree, and you couldn't really make a test of it because you sort of just have to do it. It really helped lead to other things, and that was really good.
Graham Bennett received a permanent commission to create a work that would celebrate the natural surroundings. Graham's vision brought forth a work that would echo sky and sea, latitude and longings.
Planning a work that's going in a particular place, you're looking at aspects of the landform, so that you're putting something there, you're putting a concept there that you've worked on, and it's an overlay of lots of other things you've done in the past. What interests me most, I think, is the uniqueness of New Zealand and where we are. All my large-scale works, this included, make reference to the trajectories of New Zealand in the Pacific, the axes, the tectonic plates, and so I'm more interested in that and the impact of the Pacific Ocean on our being. And some of the things that I looked at here, particularly were the angles and of the branches of the small Kanako stand, and the colours of the bark too. That first day that I came, there was in rain and they were very black, but they've got that nice greyness when they dry as well.
The land at Connells Bay enables stories to be told, with some sculptors tracing the contours of history and memory.
The idea here is you come up and you don't know what you're going to be seeing. Suddenly a little glimpse of something happens, and then it reveals itself slowly, and that's the concealment, and then the surprise that comes at the end. I wanted to be some sort of feeling of a journey, and the names of the first 4 settlers since 1873 are branded into the wood, like at entry point from the ground and then at exit point back into the ground. So it's very much ground centred, like coming out and going back in. So it rises and twists and falls and then disappears back in, much like the Tomo or underground river.
For David McCracken, the process of creation is still very much in progress, and he's now working with his material around the clock.
You can see it's starting to rust in, and the marks of the fabrication are disappearing, and eventually they become a seamless single block of colour as the rust becomes more even.
McCracken's fabrication is not yet complete, and his 32 cubes must interlock to form his sculptural poem.
We're going to assemble them roughly on Monday and just check that they all fit together and I've got the spelling right. and then we'll get ready to load up.
The sculpture will travel to Connells Bay by land and sea for its installation. But with it travels a load of heavy expectation. McCracken's sculpture has begun its journey to Connells Bay. Installation day has come.
G'day, Mary. Welcome here.
G'day. Great to see you.
Good to have you here. Long time, haven't you?
And it all got onto one truck?
Yes, yep. We'll put probably 2 more blocks down on the level. It's to establish our bottom level, and then we'll make the next step. So set up, get make sure our levels are all comfortable and working, and then we can just literally start placing them in. And after that, it's a case of they all have to be welded down, painted under the ground, and you know, just cleaning up.
When you see it, we saw it in the studio and it was quite small, and then it started to grow as you put it up. And at one stage we were concerned, would the landscape take over?
They've had their hiccups, but they've had it together twice already, so Dave actually said it's going together better here at the moment.
Dave's he keeps everything inside, but I know that with the deadline coming up, you know, to get in this week, you know, all the blocks were loaded on the truck and that. I think he was packing himself really with just thinking, oh, I hope this all goes smoothly, and actually, you know, putting it in, just the logistics of putting it in.
It seems tall to me because I actually never seen it 3 high, but that's what I anticipated. I guess it's an unusual thing when you make the maquette and you see it and then you suddenly look and you, oh my God, there it is, it's actually real. And it looks kind of like what I said it was going to.
But we didn't set out to open the sculpture park to the public. We did set out after a while to create a sculpture park for our own enjoyment. And as Joe suggested, it was when our friend said, you've got to share this, it's pretty special.
We realised we had to open it to the public because it's something that we'd be selfish to keep for ourselves.
People are initially fascinated by the philanthropy of Joe and John, which is an extraordinary and unique thing that they're doing. And there's not really many people who have this kind of aim, I suppose. Really what they're doing is thinking about art in an expanded field and thinking about how sculpture can interact outside of the usual kind of gallery walls. It's a little bit like a stepladder towards understanding, giving people a bridge and a link in as to where to start, what kind of questions to ask.
But away from Connells Bay, does contemporary sculpture have any resonance with a non-art crowd?
I really like big machinery, probably especially so, and anything big's always intrigued me, something that you can say go and walk up beside and you're smaller than one of the tyres, and you know, big machinery, things like that I enjoy and sort of get a bit of a kick out of and things like that.
I don't really have any prior knowledge of sculpture other than playing with plasticine as a child. If I am pointed to something and someone says this is by such and such artist and this is why it's important, I will then believe that it's important.
While some have little sculptural experience, others like bodycaster Anna are already believers.
I'm a great fan of public art and public sculpture. Good public sculpture unifies the sense of place and the viewer. You know, whether it's figurative work or abstract work, there's something about three-dimensional work that just commands some sort. It commands space.
Our new art critics are now making a trip to Connells Bay to sample fine art in the raw. It could be a means to challenge the sculpture skeptics.
Presumably, a gallery invites a completely different response to building a sculpture, whereas outdoors, literally the world is your oyster. You can use wind, rain, energy and interaction.
I think it's kind of brave that anybody wants to put their stuff out to be judged at all, you know. I think that's quite a, you know, it's quite a brave thing. I mean, that's the wonderful thing. If something is rubbish, you can walk past it, and we walk past rubbish every day. They've got these little, you know, the city council has little round bins for it to go into. And so, yeah, we don't get particularly offended by those bins, so why should we get particularly offended by anything that we don't necessarily look at and enjoy if we do believe that it's honestly rubbish?
While some in the group have high expectations, others wait to be impressed. Reaching Waiheke Island, the group start their art journey. And along with lunch and sunscreen, each of the group brings with them ideas of what modern art already is, or should be.
This is where we begin the walk, and I'd love you all to contribute in different ways and ask plenty of questions.
First stop on the journey is work by kinetic sculptor Phil Price.
I think the thing about making work for the outdoors is that it's a public experience, and you don't necessarily have people choosing to go and have that experience, whereas in a gallery situation people are making a choice to go through the door. So that's a nice thing, you know. I mean, it's a wonderful to have an audience which is a public audience, which is probably broader than your sort of more academic art audience. These guys in this place kind of kicked me off in a way.
Are your ideas always floating around in your head, or are they inspired by your environment?
I sort of start out, I guess, with a shape or a form which is, you know, just invented, and it might be a shape that's something in nature or something that I know about or is a known form.
This is Virginia King, and this is her most beautiful Oioi bridge.
Virginia, did you have to make any alterations to the original landscape?
Just to drain this bit of land, I think there is probably definitely there was a flow path across here. I wanted to draw attention with the position of the bridge, with what else was happening here. And I'm just so pleased with the planting that John Jove put in and the way it encloses the area. And it also, I mean, they've put in a lot of the Oioi grass, just to echo what the bridge is about.
Virginia King has done a number of these art bridges, I guess is what you'd call them. And they're works that really invite you to engage directly with the artwork, to participate in the artwork, really. And nowhere is that clearer than on this bridge, that the minute you step onto that bridge, it springs into life. It's a percussive and kinetic artwork. All the ridges and planks and ribs are all loosely attached. They're quite flexible, so that they vibrate and rattle as you walk across the bridge.
The general idea for this shrinkage self-portrait came from my long interest in using figure in my work. Vanish is a work which deals with self-portraiture. It's the work which consists out of 160 figures of myself. It basically is made out of 16 different sizes. I kind of wanted to use these colors also that they stand out in this sort of natural environment. I quite liked how there were quite interesting readings introduced through these orange orals, like Guantanamo Bay prisoners.
That's almost like the modern version of the little terracotta soldiers too. It's got something really odd about it, unnerving, spooky.
Can't really see it, but then you turn around and then you start looking and then they all of a sudden just go shing.
Up on the hill, a work emerges from the bush, a metallic creature that hears and speaks. It's a work that started in the mind of its creator, Phil Dadson.
When you're experimenting with a lot of materials, I mean, you're always wandering around. I'm the kind of guy that was kind of tapping stuff and just checking stuff out, particularly industrial materials, because often, you know, you can be surprised by what something can produce sonically. And these things all start to accumulate as a reservoir of possibilities. The plan of this particular work was that you had a rather big, rather commanding visual presence in the landscape, which with the intention was that it would attract people in. It doesn't do anything, you can't hear anything from a distance. But as you get closer and you realise what it is, that it encourages an interactive exploration. And so people, when they see what, you know, is kind of on the base ends, and they start to realise that these things make sound and stuff, I mean, then it's kind of all on then. People kind of really interact, and that's fun.
Phil, why this shape? Does it represent anything?
It does to me. I mean, it's I wanted to use 10 as a little bit like two hands.
But does Connells Bay really open doors to fine art? What has anyone from the small group gained from just being here?
It's quite incredible. It's really astounding. I mean, at first I was almost cynical because I kind of, yeah, it gets the whole butterfly collector thing. But then when you actually see it in its space, and I'm like with Phil and how he's made something to fit this area, and it's astounding. No, I think it's incredible. It's incredible what they've done, and it's very beautiful.
It's really like walking through the best of New Zealand sculpture, like walking through a book. Every time you turn around a corner is like turning a page, and here comes, you know, a new vista and a new sculpture presented to you. And I was really impressed by the level of consideration that each artist had to the site.
I think that it's such a great outing for anyone, regardless of whether they know anything about art, because sculpture, unlike a painting against a stark wall in an art gallery, is something that is non-threatening, and I mean, even if you don't understand exactly where the sculptor's coming from, you feel something.
The colour was quite extraordinary. Often sculpture tends to blend, well, often it blends into the environment, but a lot of the artists there chose to conflict with the environment or add to the environment or offer something new to the environment. It wasn't browns and greens necessarily, it was a lot more bold and more contrasting.
It was something that I wasn't expecting, and it was good to see some sculptures and sort of the way that they are done, and to meet some of the sculptors that did it and sort of get their point of view and see where they get their inspiration from. Today I certainly had my eyes opened.
People love it. They just love walking through. It's non-threatening, unlike art in a gallery sense, which can be threatening. Sculpture outside is not. It's tactile. People can touch it. They enjoy walking around and amongst and...
It's not flat against a wall.
A few weeks later, and it's the launch presentation for David McCracken's new piece at Connells Bay. The Gals work to entertain their invited guests, many of whom represent fine art's inner circle. But what would David McCracken like to be told about his latest work?
You learn to expect nothing. Some people get things that some people don't like. My daughter didn't like it, that's for sure. She told me it was the stinkest work in the whole property.
It's a nervous moment for McCracken. At last his work and its journey are plain for all to see.
If you haven't met Dave McCracken, we've followed Dave's work for some time. Joe and I have been talking to Dave, and Dave would come up with a few ideas here and there, and eventually he came up with an idea and we said, yep, that's what we're doing.
What it was a series of incredibly amateurish lunges at trying to achieve the right piece for the job. And it's an amazing testimony to John and Joe that they were so indulgent.
Well done, Dave.
Dave definitely always pushes boundaries in terms of what he does with his material. What these works have all done largely, they have some reference to site, to place, to activity at Connells Bay. And they've tended to be large scale because the Gals are really supportive of artists just doing a little bit more than they're used to doing, just pushing the boundaries. Dave's work, though, I think actually does break all those moulds quite literally in what he's done here.
There's a real kind of core language of sculpture, which is about kind of scale and mass and weight and the space that a sculpture engages with. And that work has everything. It ticks all the boxes. So I've kind of got an awesome sort of sense of scale, the weight and the drama of it in the landscape. He's pulled off perfectly. Also, art and contemporary sculpture is a lot about disrupting the space that it's in. So this idea that it's a straight wall through a natural environment is a very engaging kind of idea, because a lot of contemporary art, this idea of transgression, of sort of changing something in your environment.
It has been said that sculpture decelerates our busy lives and adds a more finely nuanced view of the world. To disregard it is to be content with surroundings replete with blank square patterns and repetitive forms. But sculpture in a natural setting is restless, unsettling, provoking us to dream and imagine new things. It's art without borders, a gallery without walls.
What Connells Bay really offers is a showcase of major sculptures by premier artists in New Zealand. This park does put New Zealand sculpture in the international arena, really. It does have an international reputation.
We just see it as a never-ending journey. The day we can't put another work in will be a sad day for Joe and myself. We often wonder where the project will go, what will happen to the sculpture park in the future, but we don't actually know where it's going to end up. We know the trees are going to grow. You know, it's about having a body of work where there's a variety of medium and everything that's here. And We hope we never finish this project. We don't want it to finish. We don't ever want it to be complete.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.